Sorry it's long. It needs to be written out, though. I'm not sure what to do here. I think I'm really just feeling lost and need some validation that I'm making the right choice. Throwaway account, of course. Trigger warning. Mentions of cancer and cancer death. A little bit of history to start out. I, 36-year-old female, have had the same two best friends, Bethany and Sadie, both 38-year-old females. Pseudonyms for the past 22 years. The three of us used to be very close, but they had a falling out about 10 years ago and don't talk as much as they used to. But both are still very close with me. Bethany and her spouse and children moved a couple states away, about 8 years ago. But we keep in decent touch. I don't talk to either of them on a super regular basis because we're all in our late 30s now. And life gets busy, but we all know what we mean to each other. Bethany's one of those people that you just feel tied to on an emotional level no matter what happens, like a soulmate. They're in your life for better or for worse. She has a history of going off the radar sometimes when she's feeling overwhelmed. For example, several years ago, she broke up with her boyfriend a couple of weeks before I got engaged, and subsequently disappeared for 2 months. I wasn't even able to tell her, or ask her to be in my wedding for that span of time. I understood because I figured it was hard for her to be happy for me when she was mourning her own relationship. Sadie, on the other hand, is always there. She has a big personality, and we have more instances where we butt heads than I have ever had with Bethany. But we're always able to work it out and get past it. I know I can rely on her in a crisis. Back to now, in the middle of December, I had to have an ultrasound done on a protrusion in my abdomen. The report afterwards expressed the possibility of cancer. I didn't say anything to them until I got a follow-up CT that suspected the same thing. Both of them seemed pretty upset, which surprised me, because there was no official diagnosis yet. I didn't expect them to worry so much until we knew for sure, and made me feel incredibly guilty for not just waiting. Sadie began ramping up her efforts to keep in touch, dropping me texts here and there to let me know she was thinking of me, etc. Bethany did at first, but in mid-January when I got the official diagnosis, retroperitoneal liposarcoma, which is a malignant soft tissue tumor in the abdomen, things changed a bit. At first, she kept saying she was going to come back to our home state to be there for me during the surgery and recovery, despite how many times I told her I would never expect that big of a commitment. She has 2 children, an estranged ex-spouse to coordinate the kids with, a new boyfriend, and a full-time job in her state. And she kept saying, "No, I'll be there," which I believed, because she had done the same thing for her mom several times a couple of years prior. She had also made a day trip about a year ago for a friend's funeral. But then, radio silence. I texted her a couple of times to ask her if she still planned on coming, and continued to tell her there was no pressure, but that I'd love to see her face. Sadie also asked her about it, as she had offered her a place to stay when in town. She didn't reply until the night before my surgery, saying she would still be coming, but wouldn't be able to get here until a month later. She gave me a date she was aiming for. I was a little sad, but understood. I didn't reply to the text because I didn't even read it until the morning of my surgery, when I wasn't responding to anyone because there was way too much happening. The surgery was successful. They removed the tumor and one of my kidneys, but were able to spare other surrounding organs. When the pathology report came back a couple of weeks later, it outlined that all the margins they tested around the tumor were negative, which is great news. My mom was texting Sadie and Bethany the whole time to give them updates. Bethany never replied to her. Sadie came to visit me in the hospital and brought me dinner and coffee a couple of times since I've been home. She consistently checks in on me and asks me if I need anything else. Bethany has not texted me or called me since the day before my surgery. Granted, I have not reached out to her either. But in my defense, I wasn't able to be on my phone much the first couple of weeks. You take for granted how much you can rest your arms/wrists on your torso when you play on your phone. I had an incision spanning from my sternum to my pubis, so I really couldn't do much for long. All this to say, it was uncomfortable to look at my phone for more than a minute or two. I usually only just responded to a couple of things and had to put it down. The more time passed, the more disappointed I was starting to get, and the less inclined I was to make the first move. To be fair, I was sad that she had not come to visit. But I was not upset with her for it. But not even reaching out to me, it just seemed so strange. I thought maybe she was feeling triggered because of the fact that her mother died of cancer a couple of years ago. So I kept telling myself to give her time. A month passed. The date she had given me earlier started approaching, and I didn't hear from her. Sadie had also reached out to her a couple of times, asking if she still needed a place to stay. No reply. And then all of the pictures began pouring in on Facebook. Her new boyfriend tags her in literally everything. They were out of town at a concert. 2 days before she had said she was coming to see me, I still tried to reason that maybe they would be ending the life of two birds with one stone and swinging through this way on the way home, but they did not. In fact, they were at another concert in a different state the day she had said she would be here. To be clear, I'm not mad she didn't come. I understand she works, has children, and has to coordinate childcare stuff with her ex. But to not reach out all this time? To not tell me she wouldn't be able to make it? To go to a concert instead and not even say anything? To make things worse, the concert was our favorite band. A band that has been very special to us for years. Sadie is furious. She sent her a text message basically asking her where she has been and telling her it's unacceptable that she disappeared for this. She didn't reply. I'm left wondering if I did something to deserve this, even though I know in my heart I didn't. It's not like I didn't have a good support system with my husband, my mother, Sadie, and other friends. I feel guilty for holding it against her, but I can't help it. I have dealt with her doing this for so long that I don't know if I can forgive it this time. I'm going to include the text message I sent to her last week at the bottom of this post, in case anybody is curious. No response to it, by the way. I'm just so sad and needed to put my feelings somewhere. Thank you for reading. My text to Bethany. I don't even know how to start this. This is hard. Nothing I ever set out to do has ever been or will ever be with the intention of hurting you. I hope you know that. I'm just so exhausted from everything that I don't even have the energy to be upset. I'm just feeling kind of numb. It wasn't that you didn't come up here. It was that you kept saying you would be here, but didn't communicate with me whenever you found out you couldn't. It's that I haven't heard from you since the day before my surgery. I have colleagues reaching out to me on the regular, but not my best friend. You didn't have to be here to be here. Kind of hurt extra that you were seeing. Our favorite band, too. Like I had to be on your mind leading up to this, right? I just feel like I've spent years defending these moments to people. That I know sometimes when you get triggered, you pull away. That I have always tried to give you the space for that. I have always loved you through it, and I knew this was going to be hard for you because of your mom. And I feel guilty even expressing my feelings, because even at this exact moment, my instinct is that something must be going horribly wrong in your life, and that you need some grace. But I don't know that I have enough to give. This was a big deal for me too. This was the scariest thing I have ever done. Expounding on the experience a bit, it's pretty personal, so I took it out for Reddit. I really needed you. Not necessarily in person, because I know that's not always realistic. But I needed you to communicate with me. To just tell me you were thinking of me. Or even tell me when you felt triggered and that you needed time. I just don't know what to do or say or how to move forward, if there is even a path for that. I can honestly say I have never felt so let down in my life. And I'm not saying that to hurt you. I'm just speaking my truth as I feel it. I love you. I'll always love you, no matter what happens. And I hope you're doing okay. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I'm so glad that your surgery was successful, and I hope your recovery goes smoothly. I understand how you feel. I didn't have cancer, mind you, but a devastating miscarriage after trying for 4 years. I texted her, got an, "I'm sorry, are you okay?" And then that was it. It's been 2 years and still not a word. Poof, gone. Went from seeing each other multiple times a week to not talking. I was there for her so many times, and I couldn't imagine that she wouldn't do the same for me. I supported her through her marital problems, work, even illness. I sent her a worded email that sounded like yours. I'm sorry Bethany wasn't there when you needed her most. We're definitely #Team Sadie. Comment 2. I have been sick, not cancer, for almost 6 years. You'd be surprised how many friends I've lost because hanging out with me isn't as easy as it used to be. For some of them, I get it. They have other stuff going on, but I have friends I've known since I was a kid that have vanished on me. Meanwhile, someone else who I wasn't really friends with, though we'd known each other since kindergarten, was consistently checking in on me. Illness shows you who you can count on. You cannot count on Bethany even after you poured your heart out to her in a text message. I hope you know you're worth more than that. Sadie knows you are, and I'm sending you positive healing thoughts. Now for the update. Thank you for sticking with me. Last week, my world turned upside down again. Just when I thought things were settling down after my surgery, my doctor called with news that knocked the wind out of me. There was a complication they hadn't caught before. A secondary growth, small but aggressive, that needed immediate attention. I was facing another surgery, more invasive this time with a longer recovery period. The thought of going through it all again was daunting, and I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal from Bethany's silence. I confided in Sadie, who was as supportive as ever, but I could tell she was holding back her anger toward Bethany. She didn't want to add to my stress. I appreciated that, but I also knew she was itching to confront Bethany about her absence. The days leading up to the second surgery were a blur of appointments and preparations. I was so preoccupied that I barely noticed the date Bethany had promised to visit had come and gone without a word from her. It was Sadie who brought it up, her voice tight with barely contained fury. She had been ready to offer Bethany a place to stay, and the lack of communication felt like a slap in the face to both of us. Then, 2 days before my surgery, my phone buzzed with a message from Bethany. My heart leaped, but as I read her words, my stomach sank. She was apologizing, saying she couldn't make it because her new boyfriend's mother had fallen ill suddenly, and they had to rush to her side. She was sorry, so sorry, but family had to come first. I understood, of course, family should come first, but it stung. It felt like a convenient excuse, especially after seeing her social media filled with concert photos and smiling faces. I didn't have the energy to reply. I was too focused on the looming surgery and the fear that clung to me like a second skin. The day of the surgery arrived and Sadie was there, as always. She held my hand until they wheeled me away, her promise to update Bethany on my condition, the last thing I heard before the anesthesia took hold. When I woke up groggy and in pain, Sadie was there with a smile and good news. The surgery had been a success, and the doctors were optimistic about my recovery. But there was more. Sadie had taken it upon herself to do something I never would have had the courage to do. She had called Bethany, not to update her on my condition, but to confront her about her absence. It turned out Bethany had been struggling more than any of us knew. The concerts, the new boyfriend, it was all a facade. She was drowning in guilt over her mother's death, and the fear of losing me, too. She had been pulling away because she couldn't face the possibility of going through that pain again. Sadie's call was a wake-up call for her. She broke down, apologized, and promised to do better, and she did. The next day, Bethany called me. Her voice was thick with tears as she poured out her heart, explaining everything. She promised to visit as soon as she could, to be there for me in any way she could. It was a hard conversation, full of raw emotion and painful truths, but it was also a turning point. In the weeks that followed, Bethany kept her promise. She was in constant contact, sending messages, calling, and finally visiting. She was there, really there, and it felt like I had my friend back. It wasn't easy to rebuild that trust, but we were both willing to try. Sadie was a rock through it all, her loyalty never wavering. She had been the catalyst for change, and I couldn't have been more grateful. It was a reminder that sometimes the hardest choices can lead to the best outcomes. I'm still recovering, still fighting, but I'm not alone. I have 2 friends who have shown me the true meaning of friendship in their own ways, and for that I'm thankful. Thank you for reading. My boyfriend criticized my eating habits to make himself happy. So I embraced my sweet tooth and left him starving for my attention. Where do I even start? We've been having issues for a couple of months now, and he says that because I'm such an emotional person. I always react unjustly to his logic. So I'm going to try to tell this as unbiased as I can for insight on if I'm overreacting. It's Easter, and I feel like my boyfriend seems off at his family party, but I brush it off and get on with the day. It's nearing the end, and he asks me if I want to go upstairs for a little bit, and when we get up there, he explains that he's bothered by our conversation from last night. Last night, the topic of my eating habits came up. I should preface this with the fact that I am a very active person. I lift and do cardio 6 days a week, so it's not like I'm inactive. Also, I should preface with the fact that I had a pretty bad eating disorder from the 7th to 10th grade, and then again from freshman to senior year of college. I was extremely restrictive, counted every calorie, and just had a terrible relationship with food and my body. Now, I can confidently say that this is the first time I've ever felt comfortable with eating. I try to make good choices as much as I can, but I allow myself to indulge without guilt. I eat enough calories and prioritize getting enough protein and vegetables. My Achilles heel is dessert. I have a huge sweet tooth and eat too much sugar. Like, I'll have a protein yogurt and one of those protein muffin cups in the morning. And then after dinner, I'll have a little dessert like ice cream or pudding or whatever. It's not like I'm gorging myself. But if I want dessert 4 nights a week, I don't think that's that horrible of a thing. My boyfriend disagrees. He said that he thought a lot about the conversation and realized that if I don't start eating better, less sugar and apparently fat, that is, eat what he eats, he'll probably resent me in the future when we live together, because your partner is supposed to make you a healthier person. I don't completely disagree with him, but I also really don't think I'm eating badly enough to warrant the sit down. And I just feel like it isn't love if it just goes away, because I'm not staying in my macros. It just made me feel like I'm not loved and accepted for just being me, like I have to change. And further start thinking about food again, like I did when I had disordered eating. He said he's concerned about my health and we are going to have kids someday. And nutrition is important to be on the same page about, which I get, so maybe I am overreacting. It kind of ended up in a really bad place when we had to leave, so we still haven't talked about what happened. He wasn't comforting whatsoever during the conversation, which is something we've discussed before that ended up being talked about. And it progressed into me not feeling good enough for him unless I do exactly as he says and live my life the way he thinks is the right way. It was messy and things are really up in the air right now. What do you guys think? Am I making this a big deal for no reason? Am I justified in being a little upset, embarrassed? I hate the thought that I'm going to be constantly thinking about what I'm eating in front of him. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. He says that because I'm such an emotional person, I always react unjustly to his logic. The people who say things like this mistake their emotions for logic and are very emotionally immature. Your opinions and reactions will always be seen as emotional and inferior, and his will be seen as logic and superior. And as a result, he will not be able to do any of his own emotional legwork and is going to be exhausting. What you've cited is a perfect example. If you don't eat exactly the way he wants you to, he is going to resent you and be unable to help himself. It's not 100% clear from the story, so I want to ask, did he have this conversation with you while you all were still at the family party? Or was it after the party? Comment 2. He's either super controlling and has a disordered relationship with food himself, or this is simply the straw he's grabbed onto to justify eventually ending the relationship. My guess is that if it weren't your diet, which is fine, by the way, he would come up with some other thing that would be a deal breaker. Couching it in terms of worrying about your health and caring about the health of his future non-existent children makes him seem less of a bad guy in his eyes. Release this fishy back into the sea. Now, for the update. Thanks for all the comments on my last post. I really needed that outside perspective, so after that Easter mess, things went from bad to worse. My boyfriend, let's call him Mr. Perfect, decided to take his concerns to the next level. He started replacing my usual groceries with healthier options. I found my favorite ice cream swapped for some chalky low-calorie substitute. My cupboard, once filled with treats, now looked like a health food store. I felt like I was losing control over my own choices. Then, one day, I came home to find Mr. Perfect packing his bags. He said he needed space to think about our future. He left, just like that. No discussion, no goodbye kiss. I was stunned. I mean, we had our issues, but to just walk out, it felt like a slap in the face. I didn't even get a chance to argue or explain how I felt. He was gone, and I was left questioning everything. In the aftermath, I tried to keep busy. I focused on work, went to the gym, but everywhere I looked, I saw reminders of him. It was like he was haunting me, even though he wasn't there. My friends said I should be relieved, that I dodged a bullet, but it didn't feel that way. I felt abandoned. A couple of weeks passed, and I was starting to get used to the silence when my phone buzzed. It was Mr. Perfect. He wanted to talk. We met at a coffee shop, the air thick with tension. He said he missed me, but he had conditions for coming back. He wanted us to see a nutritionist together, to make sure we were on the same page about our health. I was torn. Part of me wanted to tell him to shove his conditions where the sun doesn't shine, but another part of me, the part that still cared, agreed. We started seeing this nutritionist who, to my surprise, was actually pretty understanding. She didn't push crazy diets on me, just sensible eating. It was going okay until Mr. Perfect started questioning her credentials because she didn't fully endorse his extreme views on nutrition. He argued with her in front of me, and it was embarrassing. I felt like I was caught in the middle of a battle I didn't want to fight. The final straw came when I found out Mr. Perfect had been talking to his ex. Apparently, she's some kind of fitness model now, and they'd been exchanging health tips. I felt betrayed. All this talk about health, and it turns out he's been getting cozy with his past? It was too much. I confronted him, and it was like a dam broke. He admitted he still had feelings for her, that they shared this lifestyle connection that we didn't have. I was livid. All this time, he'd been making me feel inadequate over some ice cream, and he was the one not being true to our relationship. I told him it was over. I couldn't be with someone who made me feel so small, who couldn't accept me for who I am. He didn't fight it, he just left. Again. And there I was, picking up the pieces of my self-esteem. Now I'm trying to move on. I've been eating what I want, when I want, and it feels liberating. I'm not binging on sweets or anything, just enjoying them without guilt. I've realized that I don't need someone else to validate my choices. I'm enough, just as I am. It's a terrible situation to feel like you've lost a part of yourself to someone else's ideals. But I'm accepting it, learning from it. I'm not going to let Mr. Perfect or anyone else dictate how I should live my life. I'm taking back control, one spoonful of real ice cream at a time. Thanks for reading. My wife's cop partner crossed the line with their friendship. So I exposed his affairs and watched his career and marriage crumble. My wife is a police officer and, being such, spends a lot of time with her male co-workers while at work. This year, she became closer friends with one of the other police officers. We also both became friends with his wife, as well as our kids would play together. They have been good friends to us, and vice versa. They started going to the gym together while off duty. And while it struck me as different, it's a public place, and I trust my wife. So I let it be. There were a few times where they went to the gym together and then went to lunch for a few hours afterwards, which started to ring my alarm bells. Still, I didn't make my insecurity my wife's problem. In December, my wife had the worst call of her career, and someone lost their life. I could tell that she needed support from someone who understood the incident and her job better than I did. We frequented our now friend's home, and she would talk to him about how she felt, what she saw, what she did. She also talked to me about these things, but I believe on a lesser level. She had to go to work and view the body camera footage. As you can imagine, this would force her to relive this incident. Her coworker knew I was at work, so he insisted on driving her to view footage so she didn't have to drive home alone. My wife never asked me to be available to take her, never told me what time it was at so I could make accommodations. Her and I got into a fight over it. I told her this wasn't his place to take her, and I felt betrayed. To me, she flipped it and told me that I never asked what time or offered. Whatever, we worked past it. Recently, this coworker has been doing things that began to rub me the wrong way again. He texts her every day. She also engages in convo. He brushes the snow off her car when at work. Only her car, no one else. Last week, she came home in a shitty mood and I asked what was up. She was dismissive and didn't tell me anything. I broke some moral rules and I looked in her texts a few days later. On the day she was in a bad mood. First, this guy texted her at 5:15 a.m. She was at home. Good morning. My wife didn't respond until 8 a.m. while at work and asked him how his day was going. He responded he was having a bad day. She asked why. He wrote a long text telling her basically that they used to hang out and go to the gym, and now he's mad that they don't anymore. She responded that she doesn't have as much time anymore, and that he is stressing her out by continuing to bring it up. He responded some sappy stuff about how much the friendship means to him. I also spoke with one of their coworkers, and he explained this guy had done something similar before with another female coworker. So I brought up to my wife how I felt that this was crossing the friendship line, and there was an emotional affair for at least one of them, and that I believe men think differently than women do. We got into a decent argument about it. Afterwards, she agreed with how I view things. She texted him asking for a boundary and that he needs to back off a bit. He demanded to talk to her on the phone and she refused. He got pissed that she wouldn't talk to him and told her the conversation was over. His wife then contacted my wife saying she thinks she could explain a few things. I'm not sure the extent of their conversation. My questions are, 1. Am I reading this wrong? Am I being insecure about my wife having a friendship with a man and that he can be very present in her life outside of work? 2. Being that we had been friends as families for a bit of time, how do I proceed with him? Obviously, there's a conversation that should be had. Do I wait for him to reach out to me, or do I reach out? If I'm blunt with him about what I think is going on in his head, I'm sure that ends the friendship. If I sugarcoat it and try to salvage the friendship, I may look like an insecure, controlling husband. Also, it doesn't really guarantee my point was delivered and could leave this open to becoming an issue again. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I think your wife just wanted a friend in her workplace as a buddy, nothing more. The guy took that as a hint. I suggest you talk to your wife without confrontation and judgment. Calmly and patiently, too. There doesn't appear to be any encouragement from her side. As far as the guy, I would have a proper talk about what exactly his issue is. What does he want? Make him see what he is, a reflection, but calmly. Comment 2. He's not a work friend if he's making demands on your wife's time after she said to back off. You better confront this head on. Forget all that tread carefully advice nonsense. This guy is out of line, and your wife is out of line for letting it get this far. You're her husband. That supersedes any friendship or nonsense about work trauma. Now, for the update. Thanks for sticking around. A lot has happened since my last post. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife after my wife set boundaries with her coworker. But things took a turn for the worse when his wife showed up at our door, tears streaming down her face, clutching a handful of printed text messages between my wife and her husband. Turns out, she had been suspecting something for a while and had gone through his phone. The confrontation was messy. Accusations flew, and my wife, caught off guard, tried to explain. But the damage was done. The coworker's wife left, saying she needed time to think, and my wife sat on our couch, a mix of anger and shame on her face. She had never intended to hurt anyone, she said, but intentions don't always match outcomes. A few days later, the coworker was suspended from work. The story goes that he had been using his position to get closer to female colleagues, and my wife wasn't the first. The department was taking it seriously, and an investigation was underway. It was a relief, in a way, to know that my gut feeling wasn't just jealousy, but it was a cold comfort. Then, the news dropped. My wife was pregnant. We'd been trying for a while, so it should have been good news, but the timing was terrible. Whispers started at her work, and I could see the strain it put on her. She swore the child was mine, and I wanted to believe her, but doubt is a persistent Zaza. We decided to lay low, to focus on us and the pregnancy. But the coworker wasn't done yet. He showed up one evening, uninvited, saying he wanted to clear the air. I saw red. This man had brought nothing but chaos into our lives. And here he was on my doorstep, asking for forgiveness. I told him to leave and never come back. He left, but not before saying that he was just as much a victim in all of this. The aftermath was a quiet storm. My wife took a leave of absence from work, and we started going to counseling. It was hard, opening up about all the insecurities and fears, but it was necessary. We were rebuilding, piece by piece. And then, 2 weeks after the coworker's visit, his wife came back. She had made her decision. She was leaving him and wanted my wife to know that she didn't blame her. She had seen the texts, the full context, and she understood that her husband was the problem, not my wife. It was a small vindication, but it didn't erase the past months. We thanked her and wished her well. She was going to need all the strength she could muster. As for the coworker, I cut him off completely. No more chances, no more benefit of the doubt. He had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. My wife and I were moving forward, and he wasn't part of that future. Thanks for reading. If you liked this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.